York and Orlando are almost two completely different worlds. If you're thinking about moving from New York to Orlando, where do you start? New York is one of the top states for people migrating to Orlando, and of all of Florida for that matter. Still, if you're thinking about moving down to Florida, it can be scary. I've lived in New York and I now live here in the Orlando area, so I'm pretty familiar with many of the concerns that New Yorkers have about moving to the Sunshine State. As such, I'm going to take just a few minutes to answer a few questions that should make your move to Orlando just a bit easier. These aren't listed in any particular order, but be sure to stick around for number 7 because that's the one that I believe is so often overlooked when people are thinking about moving to the Orlando area. First, let's start with what some say might be the most obvious one, the cost of living. Now, I know that the cost of living is much lower here in the Orlando area. However, I went online to provide a bit of data here, so I'll include the link to some websites below that I usually use to help my customers when they're moving to the Orlando area towards the end of this video. According to one website, the cost of living is 72% lower in Orlando than it is up in Brooklyn. Now, I've never lived in Brooklyn, but there are a ton of people here in the Orlando area that have moved from Brooklyn, so therefore I just thought it would be helpful here. This website also says that the cost of housing is 65% lower and that other expenses like transportation and utilities are also significantly less expensive. I believe that data can be used to say just about anything. But if you ask around and find someone that's lived in both places, I'm betting that you're going to find that they're going to have the same thoughts. I'll be sharing a bit more on the cost of living a little bit later here in this video. I'm Chuck Shaver and I'm a local realtor here in the Orlando area. If you're finding value so far, do me a favor and hit that like button as it really helps quite a bit with this channel's success. Next, let's take a look at Florida's taxes, which tend to be a good bit lower than those in New York. Florida's homestead exemption for residents not only lowers the assessed amount of a resident's home, but it also caps the amount that the taxes can be raised by for each year. This means that if you spend just 5 or 10 years in a home, it can really make a huge difference on your tax bill. Florida's state income tax is, well, it's zero. I believe that New York has a graduated tax structure, so I truly personally believe that you're being punished for making more money up in New York. Florida tends to be tax friendly towards businesses as well, encouraging businesses, their owners, and their employees not only to survive, but to thrive. The median cost of homes sold back in 2022 was around $428,000 when you're looking at nationwide numbers. The cost of a median home for the state of New York was just $325,000. So maybe you're thinking that New York is actually inexpensive, right? Well, no. The cost of housing in New York City, including Brooklyn, is way higher than the median for the state. Florida's median sale price was just $232,000. Now, to be clear, it will cost you more than $232,000 to get a home in the Orlando area, but that gap has got to be smaller when comparing it to the Brooklyn, New York example. Thinking of renting? Well, rental prices in the Orlando area have risen quite a bit, especially since 2020 when the home prices started skyrocketing. However, renting a home here in the Orlando area is still a good bit less expensive than it is up in New York. I read that New York is among the list of states with the lowest level of home ownership in the country, and I suspect that the cost of renting has to be one of the reasons. Now, I'm no economist, but less rentals available cannot do anything to help keep the cost of renting down for New Yorkers. How about the weather? Although I probably sound like I'm selling Orlando based on some of my other comments here, this is where I'm a bit more unsure. Yes, the weather in Orlando is absolutely amazing. We don't even own snow shovels here in the Orlando area, and ice, well, you can only find ice in your freezer around here. But the spring and the fall seasons are something that I do miss each and every year here in Florida. The sight of green grass, no, actually green, and the beautiful flowers that just seem to pop up on their own every spring, combined with the smell of those fall leaves, simply cannot be replaced. Now, I will say that I don't mind missing those blizzards, though. The blizzard in '93 will be forever etched on my mind. I've spent a good bit of time in New York City, so I'm a strong believer that there's nothing like it. I mean, in Orlando, if you want to go out for dinner after like 9 or 9:30 at night, you're pretty much out of luck except for a few outliers and maybe the bars. Orlando simply cannot compete with the nightlife, the shopping, or the restaurants of New York City. The Hudson River and those beautiful mountains are among the most beautiful I've ever seen in my life, and Orlando cannot compete with these. Those of you in New York, what am I missing here? Put your thoughts in the comments section below. However, Orlando has way more attractions than New York will ever have. Want water activities like boating, fishing, crystal clear springs, swimming in the beaches? Orlando really has it all, and you can do most of those things year-round here in Orlando. If you'd like to know more about some other cities near Orlando and what they have to offer, I'll include some links to a couple Orlando suburbs that may help to give you an idea of what it's like living in the Orlando area towards the end of this video. I remember when I moved to Orlando many years ago, I was told that there just weren't many jobs in Florida, that the pay rates didn't compare with those in the northern states, and maybe that was the case. However, one article I read noted that Florida was among the top 10 states for employment, while New York was among the worst states in the nation. Now, perhaps it's more about what you're doing than where you're doing it with the increase in remote employment these days, but this data surely suggests that things aren't so bad for employment down in Florida. Of course, some areas of the state will have varying types of jobs. Here in the Orlando area, local attractions count for a bunch of jobs for those working at Disney, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, and a bunch of others. I can go on and on. Lockheed Martin, AAA, Darden, Siemens, and Deloitte, and a bunch of others are doing just fine down here in this Orlando sunshine. Before we get too far in here, take just a second to hit that subscribe button and click that little bell so that you'll be notified whenever I post other videos just like this. If you're thinking about moving to the Orlando area, or anywhere here in Florida for that matter, go ahead and give me a call and let's see how I might be able to help you. I'm always hearing Northerners talk about how the drivers here in Florida are so bad, and maybe that's the case, but I remember being in New York City and those drivers up there are crazy. I've also heard about how expensive the auto insurance was here in Florida, but when I did some research online, I found that research did not support the concept that auto insurance is significantly more expensive here in Florida. Now, as I noted before, I'll include some links to a few websites I've used in a bit. Although Florida's hurricanes don't come every year to Orlando, they have created a mess for our insurance down here, and homeowners insurance is very expensive as such. Many insurance companies have simply closed their doors in Florida, leaving the remaining insurers to either raise their rates or simply decline coverage. So it's tough to get affordable insurance, or in some cases even get it at all. Now, I suspect that with Orlando being inland a bit, it's not as bad as, say, over at the beaches, but my homeowners insurance rates have skyrocketed over the last several years. As such, if you're thinking about moving from New York to Orlando and you have a house in mind, it may be wise to make a few phone calls to see how much that homeowners insurance premium will cost you before you sign on the dotted line. Of course, the cost of living in upstate New York is very different than down in the city. I did a quick look at Albany and I found that Orlando was just 4% less than up there, and Syracuse was actually less expensive than Orlando. So if you'd like to know more about the actual costs and how they compare to your city in New York, just give me a call. What have I missed here? Please put your thoughts in the comments section below so that others can benefit from your insight, whether you live in Orlando, New York, or wherever. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.